Hello everyone, Turtlelags here bringing you another reverse 1999 video. And today I am going to be doing a tier list video in which I rank all the 5-star and 6-star characters. And this is very exciting for me, but also very scary for me because there are many of you who I truly feel are more knowledgeable than I am and are going to roast me on some of these rankings. But please keep in mind that this is just my opinion. Even though I own all the characters doesn't mean I have playtested them all. So if you feel like you have a solid argument for why a character should be a higher tier or lower tier than what I ranked it as, please feel free to comment in the comment section below. For me, it's not so important for me to be right. It's actually more important for me to know what the truth is. And many of you have helped me along the way, even in my other videos, to basically say, hey, Turtle, you forgot to take this into consideration, or Turtle, I completely disagree with you because of this. And, people have different ways of delivering their comments, but I'm the sort of person who tries to keep an open mind. And certainly, if I feel like you have a valid reason, it is something that I seriously consider for future videos. So without further ado, let's begin. So for T0, I consider this category as the category in which if you have this character, most likely, like 90% chance or higher, they will be in one of your two limbo teams. You might run them both. And they are Tooth Fairy and Medicine Pocket. They happen to be our premier healers. Tooth Fairy, I think pretty much everyone agrees should be in T0 because she is an offensive healer that has 3 different modes of healing. One mode of healing is with her baby teeth stacks, which at I3 you already start doing crit resist shred as well as passive healing on turn 1, and then just every other turn she gets passive heals. If you have a really built account, it makes it so that you don't even need to cast a healing incantation from Tooth Fairy. Additionally, if you're running Tooth Fairy on the Inquisitive Deer Psycube, which you should, she has a second form of passive healing in which every time she casts her confusion debuff, not only is she making it so your DPS is critting more, but she's also healing, topping off the HP of the character on your team that has the lowest HP. So for that reason, Tooth Fairy is a fantastic healer that has 3 modes of healing, 2 of which are completely passive, don't require any actions, as well as being an offensive healer in the form of confusion application. Not to mention she dispels debuffs on your party if you crit on your ultimate. And then for Medicine Pocket, the reason why I have him as also T0 is because most of the time, if you have Medicine Pocket as a healer as well, you're probably going to run Medicine Pocket on the other team unless you're running a Jessica Sotheby combination, which I'm not sure how many people would have that combination, but even so, Medicine Pocket is a character who you can easily slot into the second party and just put in work. In a way, Medicine Pocket is both an offensive and defensive healer because in the offensive category, he is able to apply a debuff incantation, which makes your next incantation deal, say, like 20%, 25% more damage. Additionally, the ability to daze with the ultimate means that you're able to control the actions of the enemy who's causing you the most trouble, and that can be invaluable, especially for accounts who are not as developed, where maybe you don't have level 60 Resonate 10 characters with level 60 optimal Psycubes. So I think for that reason, Medicine Pocket and Tooth Fairy both deserve the T0 ranking. For T0.5 ranking, I consider this ranking as one that contains characters that break the rules of the game, either by manipulating enemy actions in such a way that it really interrupts the enemy's ability to do what they want to do, but additionally breaking the rules in the sense that it accelerates the pace in which you deal increased damage. So in this case, we have four characters in the T0.5 category. We have Melania, Pickles, Regulus, and Beacorn Bloom. Let me go over each. Melania may be a character that surprises you because she might not have the damage output of, say, Jessica on a poison team, or say like a P3 to P5 Charlie on a Star Afflatus team. The neat thing about Melania is that because she is a luxurious leisure user, she is able to quickly dish out 20, 30, 40k damage per ultimate, while at the same time manipulating the opponent's Moxie in such a way that half the time you feel like you're cheating because you're making it so like they have an ultimate queued up and you just interrupt them, interrupt their ability to cast their ultimate, which is usually the action that delivers the most value. And so and what is crazy is like, for me, I have a P0 Melania, but I sometimes feel that my P0 Melania does more than 90% of my 6-star DPSs, which all have at least one portrait. So I think that Melania, she's able to do her role very well, which is to increase her own Moxie, remove the Moxie of the enemy, making it so that they can't cast their ultimates when they want to if you're prepared and doing your rotations well. And on top of that, with multiple ultimates, while being equipped with luxurious leisure, she is able to, by like turn 4, turn 5, dish out some crazy ultimate damage. She's also one of our very few single target damage dealers as well as mental damage dealers. So she fits many different roles that are not covered by many units. Pickles is another character that I think is very worthy of T0.5 ranking because I think that Pickles, so first of all, he is a character that can buff any team with a flat out 30% attack boost, 30% attack boost, but additionally, he can do it reliably on turn 2. If you have an Insight 3 Pickles, because you will start out with 2 clarified topics, you move an incantation for 1 Moxie, then you cast the 2 incantations for 4 more Moxie, and that generates 5 Moxies so that you have your ultimate the next turn. And I think this is incredibly powerful. It's always nice to have a support character who is very consistent. You don't need to reshuffle cards with Pickles. If you have an Insight 3 Pickles, you can turn to ultimate for a 30% attack boost to all your party members for 2 turns if you want to. And then as we have more DPSs that are being released, like Colabona, or maybe more broken DPSs where you really want to cast as many DPS incantations as possible, I think the stock of Pickles is only going to rise. And not to mention, Pickles has other utility as well, not just being action point generous, but also cleansing debuffs of the enemy, if I'm not mistaken. To be honest, I don't quite remember 100% just because it's not it's not the main reason I play Pickles, but Pickles also has those kinds of shenanigans, which is really nice. Regulus is a really surprising 6-star character that has impressed me more and more with each version that has been released. Regulus is our other action point generous character in the sense that every time she is inactive for a turn, she generates a stack of Restless Heart, which, when you activate Restless Heart by casting an incantation, while being in her Insight 3 form, she generates an additional Moxie. And so, in that sense, she is action point generous. And the crazy thing is that with Restless Heart, she is able to convert any additional crit rate percentage into crit damage. So it feels really good playing Regulus because none of the stat boosts go to waste. And actually, if you run Regulus on the Thunderous Applause Psycube with the crit rate resonance build, when she is in her Restless Heart state, I believe her crit rate is like 118% crit rate without even Tooth Fairy present. So if you have Tooth Fairy present, the baby teeth stacks add an additional 15%, and then the confusion debuff adds an additional 25%. So Regulus does achieve 155% roughly crit rate when she's in Restless Heart, and that extra 55% crit rate turns into additional crit damage, and her ultimates do insane damage. Like, for instance, my Regulus level 60, Resonance 10, Luxurious Leisure, when she has full Tooth Fairy support against the boss, the pyramid boss with the arms and the body, I'm doing a combined 72k damage with her ultimate under Restless Heart. It's nuts. I don't think even Charlie does that much damage at P5. So Regulus is a very scary unit who has not only high damage output, but is also action point friendly, and even has the ultimate in which you can make your party for the following turn dodge all non-ultimate attacks. So it's crazy. Like, she does so much damage, more than Lilia could even dream of, while at the same time having an ultimate that basically makes your party dodge all those attacks. It feels so good playing Regulus. And then Beacorn Bloom also feels like a cheat code because her entire kit is useful. Defense Shred, increasing the damage taken by the enemy with just one debuff that, one level 1 debuff for 2 turns already provides so much value. And then she has a surprisingly high damage output, even with her incantation that hits 2 targets. When the enemy is under a debuff state, which is almost always with Beacorn Bloom, you're getting the penetration rate percentage boost out of that. And then the ultimate is just the absolute most craziest thing ever, where she is just dealing insane damage, especially if you have P3 or higher. And then to add, insult to injury, silencing that target for 3 rounds so that they can't cast their ultimate for 3 rounds, even if they have max Moxie, 5 stacks of Moxie ready to go. I can't think of any other character who does that. I mean, we do have Moxie manipulators like Melania and X, but they don't silence the ultimate for 3 turns. Not even Voyager does that. Voyager, you need to cast like three incantations, and then finally you can silence the enemy party, but I believe it's for like 2 turns if I'm not mistaken, unless she crits on her ultimate. So Pretty nuts, Bicorn Bloom, and she can put her as a support in any team. It doesn't even need to be a plant team. Oh, and not to mention she's a luxurious leisure user too. And I'm sure many of you equip her with luxurious leisure. Her ultimate reaches insane levels, and it's quite scary. Let's talk about T1. So, T1, I consider this tier as containing characters that are the foundation, the cornerstone of different team archetypes. Whether it be their insane synergies with another particular character, or synergies with one of the above characters, or maybe they deal so much damage or provide so much utility that it can be quite amazing and quite beneficial to your party performance in endgame content. So I want to talk about Jessica and Sotheby first as a team. So Jessica Sotheby is undeniably a cornerstone team that when you put them together, you can dish out some pretty insane damage. All of a sudden, with 3 stacks of poison, your Jessica is doing anywhere between 7k to like 11k damage per incantation. It's pretty nuts. And Sotheby, while in addition to enabling Jessica in such a scary way with her really easy poison application, but she also has the ability to heal. And as you know, we only have 5 premium healers in the game, 6 if you include La Source. And so healers are like basically healers in their own right are cornerstones. So for Sotheby to be a poison enabler as well as a healer in one package, I think makes her worthy of being a T1. Now, of course, you are absolutely right when you say that if you have one without the other, they drop in the rankings. I would maybe put an asterisk here saying that this is assuming that you made the investment to pick up Jessica and Sotheby. If you have them two together, T1 for sure, without a shadow of a doubt. Colabona is also T1. She's not higher because Colabona, I think for you to really appreciate her cumulative damage output, you need to pair her up with a very good support, preferably an action point generous support like Pickles or Regulus. Colabona is very impressive because she is one of our few single target damage dealers alongside Melania and Bicorn Bloom. But additionally, she has the ability to, oh, she's a mental damage dealer. She is a luxurious leisure user. And on top of that, there was one more thing. She's one of our very few mineral DPSs right now. I know that a lot of you made valid arguments that she is not a must pull because Joan Yangzi is being released in 5 months. You know, there's very patient people out there. That's good. But Colabona, I've played her. Her portraits are not that great, but she feels very good to play. I think that she is a character I feel that I've been waiting for a long time with. Not to say that Eternity has not been a satisfactory mineral DPS. She is very good, but Colabona just feels so good. I mean, she hits hard both incantations. She has one of the most flexible Psycube. She is one of the most flexible Psycube users ever because she has high damage and you can run her on Hopscotch. You can run her on Luxurious Leisure, Brave New World, the new Psycube Carrot of the Heart. Heck, you can even run her on the less frequently used Psycubes like the Psycube that heals you every time you do damage or something. every content creator I listen to presents a different set of side cubes recommended for Colabona, and I think that really speaks to her flexibility as a DPS. I think her kit is also very flexible. Most people, when they do their rotations, would prefer to have more Saturns to get that penetration rate and thus increase damage output. But I do find that in some scenarios, having the Mars planets is also beneficial for some leech rate. It's always nice to have a DPS who is able to recover some HP, and when combined with a healer on Inquisitive Deer, makes it so that you're not really healing that much, because Colabona is healing with her red planets, Mars, and then your Inquisitive Deer tops off whoever has the least HP. So Colabona is quite nice. I like her a lot. High damage ceiling, very good synergies with like Pickles and Regulus, and even if you run her with like Bicorn Bloom or Anna Lee, she does pretty well. And then Charlie is such a surprising unit. So Charlie, when she is P3 or higher, which I think a lot of people are able to achieve right now if you've been playing since the beginning, version 1.0, Charlie does more damage than makes logical sense to me, and she does it so well. Uh, I would say that for my star teams right now, it's so insane how much her incantations do, how much her ultimate does. Now, when you play Charlie, you're mainly playing her for damage, but because her damage ceiling is so high, and she has very good synergy with Regulus and Tooth Fairy, since they share the same afflatus. I think Charlie deserves a spot in T1, because when you're looking for a star DPS, unfortunately, Lilia doesn't cut it, Matilda doesn't cut it, and Blondie doesn't cut it, not even close. And not to mention Charlie being a multi-target. It's so interesting. She does multi-target ultimate damage, but that multi-target damage is so high. Like each of those numbers are like 18k or something ridiculous like that. So Charlie, very impressive. T1 for sure. And then Anna Lee, I really seriously considered putting her in T0.5, but I think that Anna Lee, the reason why she's a tier lower than Bicorn Bloom is because Anna Lee, she buffs, she mitigates damage, she dazes. She's a very fantastic offensive and defensive unit, and she also does really amazing damage, but her daze does not feel as good as silencing the enemy for 3 turns. I do think Bicorn Bloom kind of one-ups Anna Lee in that regard. Dazing is very powerful, but you're basically delaying the inevitable for a turn, and that doesn't feel as good as Bicorn Bloom's ultimate. And for that reason, I do rank Bicorn Bloom above Anna Lee. Plus, Bicorn Bloom benefits from Luxurious Leisure, the most broken side cube in the game currently, and I think through version 1.6, and Anna Lee is a multi-target ultimate user, so yeah, damage is not as high as Bicorn Bloom, but still a very, very good unit, Anna Lee. All right, so on to the tier 2s. So tier 2 characters, I would consider these characters as ones that you would highly consider if you need a solid DPS, a solid support, a solid healer, and don't have the T0 through T1 characters. Now keep in mind that this is a tier list for only 5-star and 6-star characters. These are kind of like the Harvard students. We haven't considered the other students who, like the 3-star and 4-star students. If they were included in this tier list, I think the rankings would be a lot different. But we're kind of nitpicking between Stanford students creating a nice bell curve. That's what I was aiming for. So for this reason, T2 may have some characters that you are likely, including myself, running on your main limbo teams, but I'm just kind of creating a distinction and offering my reasons for why they might be just a tier lower than some of the other characters that are deserving of more recognition. So without further ado, so for T2, starting off with Centurion. Centurion feels so good to play. I feel like most DPSs, they fall under the category of single target or multi-target DPS, but Centurion has that flexibility of turning on that single target mode if you are running a party where you can afford to reshuffle your cards more and where you have the game plan of running her on hopscotch. And basically not casting her ultimates unless you need more heals, more self-sustain, or you're going for one final multi-target push to get damage through. So Centurion feels really nice. A very solid DPS who is certainly better than Sweetheart for the Beast DPS slot, but not as broken as Melania in the sense that you're able to also manipulate enemy actions. Centurion does her own thing. Eternity is kind of like the mineral counterpart to Centurion in that she has self-sustain. She's more like the defensive alter ego of Centurion. She doesn't have as high damage output, but because she has higher self-sustain, hits decently well with Hopscotch Psycube equipped, does increase damage the more rounds that occurs up until I think like the 5th round. That's the final damage and leech rate buff. But additionally, Eternity falls within the mineral Afflatus, which is an Afflatus that I think is probably one of the most neglected in terms of like DPS and support. Well, support, there's a lot of mineral supports, but in terms of mineral DPS, there's really just Eternity and Colabona. That's it. So for that reason, being in an Afflatus that needs more help or has fewer options, I think Eternity stock increases inflated almost because of that. I cannot justify bringing Eternity a tier lower. Most people who want a dedicated mineral team will be running her. Because I think many will skip Colabona. And then Voyager, I was tempted to bring her a tier higher, but the problem right now is that we're getting tougher and tougher bosses that are immune to control. And part of the reason why Voyager was so good was because of her ability to apply team-wide silence as well as like 4 other things that she shuts down, 4 other buffs that she shuts down. Unfortunately, she can't do that against an enemy that is immune to control, such as the Pyramid boss. Additionally, I think the Lilia boss even has some crit rate resist, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's like some insane 25 to 50% crit rate resist. So not even the confusion debuff is all that helpful these days. Not to mention the confusion application of Voyager requires an incantation level 2 of her debuff to activate. I think the one saving grace for Voyager is that she is still able to deal high counter damage as well as mitigating damage. I think it's really her counter incantation that combined with her Moxie removal, Moxie -2 with her ultimate, and just everything that she's capable of doing. She is certainly a good support, but she is more of a reactive support as well. That's something to keep in mind. You're not going to get the counter damage until the enemy hits you. And so some people might not like that lack of control in terms of damage that you can do. And so Voyager is T2 for that reason. Druvis is also T2 because her penetration is really good. I think it's one of the easiest way to disable anything that your opponent wants to do, because usually when you apply daze, you usually apply it in the form of an ultimate or in the form of a 3-star incantation. But Druvis is able to petrify for with a level 2 incantation, and she has two ways to petrify. She can petrify either with the level 2 single target incantation, or she can petrify with her ultimate. And additionally, she has synergy. She's able to she is able to apply passive benefits to any plant team in the form of Circle of Life, being able to have your team leech the enemy, offer some self-sustain that can potentially make it so that you don't need to run a healer. I mean, not many people do that, not running a healer. I think more people are. So I think the only thing against Druvis is the control immunity that more enemies have now. And in addition, her damage is not high enough to be considered a main DPS. And so she's really functioning as a sub DPS, which has to fight for the same role as, basically they're fighting against support units for that second slot on a team. And there's so many good supports out there. There's Pickles, there's Regulus, Beacorn Bloom, Anna and Lee. The competition is fierce, and Voyager. So I think Druvis might. I think a lot of people want to play her, but not as many people can play her. And then moving on to A Knight. So A Knight is a character that unfortunately I haven't played as much. I know his kit very well, but I just am running out of cacophonies I cannot keep cacophonies in my supply for more than 2 minutes, and there's so many good DPSs now that I don't have my A Knight built, and I might not ever have him built just because I always run out of cacophonies. So I'm actually kind of relying on a lot of you guys who I feel are not even running A Knight yourself, even though there was a lot of hype for him in the beginning of the game. I think the problem with A Knight is that even though he has the ability to semi-spam ultimates and deal high damage that increases as he defeats more enemies, but the problem with A Knight, I feel, is that so far in endgame content, you can't get enough flatus advantage with A Knight. And so you're missing out on that 30% damage boost, which for endgame players might not matter as much, but for maybe beginning players, well, actually, there's an argument that can be made that A Knight is very free-to-play friendly, very beginner friendly, because you don't have to worry about bad matchups with A Knight. So I guess it's two sides of the coin. But for min-maxers like myself who have all or most of the characters, built as well, having that 30% of flatus advantage can speed up runs by an additional 1 to 2 turns, which can be very satisfying. So for that reason, A Knight, I guess he's kind of like a very solid DPS unit, but if you want leverage in terms of a flatus or leverage in terms of psi cube, A Knight is very like middle of the road kind of DPS. And then Balloon Party is a surprisingly good healer who, even though she doesn't have much offensive capability, she's more of a defensive healer, a more reactive healer. And one of her incantations is completely useless. But she's really interesting in the sense that her heals are percentage based. It's not like it's a percentage of your missing HP, if I'm not mistaken, which feels weird because topping off your HP with Balloon Party is kind of tough. But if you are in the red, Balloon Party with one healing incantation or with her ultimate can bounce it right back. So for that reason, and Balloon Party is one of those characters that, like, if you keep her at Insight 2 level 50, she functions just fine. She's tanky enough to take the hits at that low of a level, while at the same time bringing still healing at a very high, just healing a lot because it's percentage based. It's based off of the percentage of your HP. It's not based off the percentage of Balloon Party's attack or HP or something like that. So Balloon Party is a very free to play friendly healer, a very resource friendly healer. You don't need to build her. You don't need to pour as many resources into her. I think she may fall off a ranking if a better healer comes out, but she is still a very good healer. All right, on to T3. So I would consider T3 as average Stanford slash Harvard students. They're very good units, certainly better than most of the 4 stars and almost all the 3 stars, but not they might seem a bit dull compared to characters in the rankings above. Now let's start with Lilia, and I think this is something that everyone can understand, especially if you've played her. Uh, Lilia is very mid, unfortunately. It's very sad because I actually like her character. She's kind of hilarious in the story. It's just so sad that the only way to have her follow-up attack is with her single target incantation. If her ultimate could also do follow-up attacks, then I think she would at least have a niche with 37. Uh, but because she only has one way to follow up attack and the rest of her kit is mid, I mean, her ultimate is horrible. It's a single target ultimate that leeches for a little bit. And so, for that reason, it's just kind of strange. Lilia, her damage is not that great. She In order for her to do good damage, she needs high crit rate. But if you have too high of crit rate, some of that crit rate gets wasted because she doesn't have Restless Heart to convert crit rate to crit damage like say Regulus does. Maybe down the road, if there's a Psycube release that converts crit rate to crit damage, then maybe Lilia will have a chance. But even then, I don't think. Basically, Lilia's kit would have to be reworked. In my view, if her ultimate could also do follow up attacks, then she could be put on the 37 team. But now you've got more follow up attackers, better follow up attackers such as Kalabona. Her ultimate does follow up attacks. Zhou does follow up attacks, and Ezra adds Eureka stacks, as does 6. So 37 has better partners for her than Lilia, unfortunately. Heck, even Voyager would make a better partner for 37 than Lilia would. But so it's really sad, and so that's why she is T3. She's still better than other star DPSs that we have that are 5 stars, but as a 6 star, she's kind of underwhelming. For Sweetheart, she has one of the most broken ultimates in the game in that she shreds reality and mental defense by, I think, I have P5, so I don't know what the P0 version is. She shreds reality and mental defense for 3 turns, and on top of that, she dazes that target for 1 round. So it's kind of nuts. It's like the upgraded version of Medicine Pocket's ultimate. The only problem is that the rest of her kit is very mid. Like her single target attack just deals straight up damage, and the multi-target incantation or the other incantation, the only way to get the damage boost is if the enemy has a debuff. But the only way Sweetheart can apply the debuff herself is by casting her ultimate. So it requires a little bit of team building considerations, and her damage ceiling is not as high as the other 2 beast DPSs, Melania and Centurion. So for that reason, Sweetheart is great. Her insights are kind of odd in that it's gender based. But as a beast DPS, if you need one, she is a decent one. average. And then Baby Blue, I thought about bringing her a tier higher, but then I realized who I put in T2, and so I was like, okay, yeah, T3 makes way more sense. Baby Blue is a very good support. Even though one of her incantations doesn't benefit reality damage dealers, but the rest of her kit is enough where even if you ran her on a reality team, she would still provide very good value in the form of increased damage output as well as casting Nightmare on the enemy to basically make them not act for a turn. Um, yeah, so for that reason, I think Baby Blue is quite good. Can kind of do similar things to what Druvis can do in the form of immobilizing the enemy. But I think, yeah, Baby Blue is a solid support, but not like an incredibly mind blowing support. Necrologist is kind of the same thing as well. Necrologist is like a really is like a delayed pickles, but she has one of the coolest gimmicks in the game with her revival ability, which is pretty nice. I mean, as an endgame player, you're probably not going to die, but if you're like maybe a player who's still building the roster, like maybe you have like I3 level 15 or level 30, you're still working on your characters, and you want a support unit that has that backup plan of revivability as well as damage boost from team-wide attack percent damage boost from an ultimate, then Necrologist is quite good. Soneto is a very good support as well, in the sense that she has her debuff has the ability to shut down attack incantations from attack moves from the enemy, and I think she's actually one of the few units who's able to do so, and she's able to do it with a level 2 debuff, which is fairly it's easier to do than an ultimate. Uh, and then she also deals decent damage as a support unit, but I think her main value is in her debuff. And so for that reason, I remember playing Soneto during the first week or two of the game, and she was very pivotal in helping me clear somnambulism. And so for that reason, I have to give her credit where it's due. But I think that now that we have so many more units, so many units that offer incredible value, and so that's why she is average, which is kind of crazy. Diggers Diggers is kind of like the unit that you can fit on any team in the sense that he shreds both mental and reality defense, applies other debuffs, and on top of that, casts Nightmare with his ultimate that can even last 2 turns if you fulfill a certain criteria. I think that the problem with Diggers is that he is a decent support, but he doesn't have amazing synergy with any units. And she's not like Beacorn Bloom, where you can debuff the enemy to deal increased damage while at the same time shutting down the enemy movements in the form of silence or in the form of daze. Well, actually, you have Nightmare, so I guess that's a consideration. Yeah, maybe he's deserving of a higher, but I mean he's a support. He's like a debuffing support who, unfortunately, even though he's a plant mental damage dealer, but he doesn't buff your team, so he doesn't activate Druvis's I1. And when I found that out, I was so sad because I was planning on actually running a Petrify team with Druvis, Satsuki, and Diggers, but I think the combination of Diggers not doing a buff to activate Druvis's Insight 1 in combination with my Cacophony deficit, I just gave up on that team. And then finally DK. So DK is one of the five premium healers that we have. We don't have that many healers in the game. She's good. Her heals are kind of mid. Certainly not as good as Balloon Party, but she does more damage than Balloon Party. But I think that you want either a healer who is actually good at healing or a healer that is a sub DPS, or maybe sub DPS is not a right word, who is an enabler of a crazy mechanic like Sotheby, in order to be ranked higher. But DK is just like she heals, she does more damage than the average healer, and that's kind of it. Um, so DK, is good to have. Good to have. So that is it for the tier threes. All right, so on to the T4s. T4 units, I would consider units that are niche and might not even be good even in their niche role. I feel so bad in saying this because, like, for Miss New Babel, I think she has one of the coolest, most badass ultimates in the game. I wish I could play her, but due to my cacophony issue, as well as the nail being put in her coffin with the release of Zhou Nyangzi, who is an offensive follow-up attacker who is insane in every single way, I cannot see Miss New Babel being placed in even a follow-up team with 37. So it's really unfortunate. And I've seen a ton of playthroughs with Miss New Babel, and this was actually what made me realize I don't want to invest resources in her anymore until my cacophony stop running out. Because with Miss New Babel, you can clear content with her. It just will take an extra 5 to 6 turns, because I don't know. She's like a meme character. She doesn't deal high counter damage, and you need to get her ultimate off first to even get her counter damage off. And then her attacks are very mid, and shielding is a very poor mechanic in this game. It's not like in Honkai Star Rail or Genshin Impact where the shields last multiple turns. It's just the shields are not good, and the shields are horrible in this game, and so for that reason, Miss New Babel is lower than mid, which is very sad because I like her as a character. And then Kanjita, she is a poison applicator who is outshined by Sotheby in every single way. Sotheby applies poison better than Kanjita and heals. Uh, and Kanjita has this kind of like she has not one, not two, but three different modes that alternate. And I haven't played her yet, but I think it might even be random. But even if it was not random, it's still terrible because it's like sometimes you want to apply poison, sometimes you want to do other things like apply confusion, and you're at the mercy of RNG. So for that reason, you know, I think the reason why she's not tier 5 is because she applies poison, and there's not many not many units that apply poison besides Sotheby and Rabies, and Jessica herself. So Conjita, I was thinking of building her, but I kind of realized now that maybe I shouldn't, and I should save my cacophonies. Satsuki, actually, let me bring her a little bit higher than Conjita. So Satsuki, if you want to run a Petrify team with Druvis, then I would say like Druvis and Satsuki is kind of a dual composition in the same way that Jessica and Sotheby is a dual composition. But the problem is that their damage output is nowhere near as high. It might even be half of the damage output of Jessica and Sotheby combined. But on top of that, uh, there's more bosses that are immune to Petrify, and there is not the perfect teammate for Druvis. And I suppose like one would argue that if you're going to run Satsuki, you've got to run Druvis. And the two of them together might still not be enough. And so for that reason, I mean, actually the PvP is a perfect example of this. I was running a Druvis with a on Resonate 4 and I was petrifying like crazy. The enemy wasn't doing anything, but I wasn't really getting much damage in either because I was spending so much time petrifying during the PvP match. So yeah, it's kind of the same idea here. And then Tenant, I know a lot of people speak good about Tenant. Tenant is our only beast support until Shamane comes out, and she has her silver bullet mechanic where you deal increased damage to that enemy, or you do increase damage for the next 2 turns, and then she has the ability to apply shields, which, as I mentioned before, is not a great mechanic. Her insights are actually pretty good, but I don't think they're good enough to bring her up to T3, unfortunately. And then for uh, for Blani, she is a star DPS that kind of has a similar situation to Lilia in that her damage output is not that high. It's like she needs crit rate damage to do she needs crit rate buffs to do decent damage, but when she gets those buffs, the ceiling is not that high, not as high as Regulus. And so for that reason, Blani is T4. Those of you who watched my PvP match against Chi know how much Chi invested in Blani. I think he had like an I3 level 30 Resonate 10 Blani with a good Psi Cube. And her damage was just not that great. And she wasn't even critting that much either. So that's T4. All right, so T5. T5 are basically the characters that require the perfect enemy to shine. Okay, and to be fair, I leveled up my X and gave him a try, and I was so disappointed, guys. Those of you guys who hyped up X for me were either hoping that I would waste my cacophonies or just don't know what you're talking about. Because okay, X is great because his ultimate removes 2 Moxie on the entire enemy party. But while that sounds amazing on paper, the reality of it is that I'm clearing waves quickly. So when I'm running my X, it's like I get his ultimate up and I have already cleared wave 1, and wave 2 has just appeared on the map and they don't have any Moxie generated yet. And so that's the problem. That's one of the problems. The other problem is that his incantations are way more situational than people make it out to be. I think that people think that X is good because his Halloween skin is OP. But besides that, gosh, like guys, I have to find the perfect enemy to debuff their shields to get like a silence off, and then like I have to study the enemy to see if they actually cast a buff, or yeah, I have to study the enemy. I have to spend a minute or two studying the enemy to see if X is worth running. And then if all the check marks run, if all the check marks, are fulfilled, then I run X. But then the problem is, then I realize that I need a level 2 incantation in order for X to actually do his thing. So it's just really stressful. It's really not satisfying. And when things don't work out the way I want it to, then it's just like, why did I even run X? I would rather run like Beacorn Bloom, or Anna and Lee, where I don't need to think. I just cast the incantation and move on to having my DPS do his or her thing. So yeah, X, I leveled him up and I was disappointed. Horpedia is another character who I'm really scared because I'm starting to get viewers saying that Horrorpedia is the most amazing character, the most amazing support ever. And then I look at his kit, and on paper, I just don't see how that can happen. I don't have the game pulled up right now, but if I just look at the characters here, let's look at Horrorpedia for a moment, and you tell me how he is broken because I don't see it. Okay, so the ultimate. Okay, fear is good. Fear is good. Uh, Fear increases mental damage taken by. No, that's not good. See, if this is not Nightmare, I thought he was good because when you guys told me that he was broken, I thought he casted Nightmare. But then it's just fear. It's just like a Beacorn Bloom's debuff for like one turn or something on the mental side. And then a logic dictates, let's see, dispels. Yeah, my pickles dispels, and his ultimate does like party wide ultimate damage increase for 2 to 3 rounds. And then sideshow, if the target is not affected by stats up, deals an additional. And this is like the most situational incantation in the universe. So, okay, and then let's look at the insights. Logic dictates. When casting rank 2 incantation, damage dealt. Okay, maybe in theory, Insight 3 turns him to a DPS. When casting rank 2, logic dictates or higher, additionally dispels counters from all targets. Okay, tell me seriously, with a straight face looking at the camera, how many enemies you fight that set up counters? Not that many. So I don't know what you guys are saying. I would like you to enlighten me for those of you who think that he is T3 or higher. Because I want to believe you guys, but I'm not dumping 15 to 20 cacophonies into a character that even on paper is not that great. And then Matilda, I love her even more after the version 1.3 main story. She was one of the main characters, and she's great. She's actually becoming one of my most favorite characters in the game, so I might actually build her just because I like her so much. I think the problem with her is that she doesn't really stand out as a star DPS. She doesn't even have the crit rate self-generating buffs that that Blondie has. But on top of that, her ceiling is not that high because you can't get portraits on her. Maybe in the main story down the road we will get portraits for her, but as a main DPS, I can't imagine her damage being that great, and then her kit is not that great either. And then Click has the same issue that X has, where in order for his incantations to do anything, they need to be level 2 or higher. But his ultimate applies a shield, and that's just not good enough. Okay, guys, I decided to spice things up by adding Shamane in here. Obviously, I haven't play tested him because he's not out in global yet. I think by the time this video releases, he will be released maybe in a couple days afterwards. But I believe Shamane is worthy of T 0.5 tier because he is basically like A Knight plus Beacorn Bloom plus Baby Blue and one more character and maybe like Blondie in one character. Let me explain what I mean by that. So if we go to Shamane, his ultimate is a mass attack that deals reality damage, enjoys 20% crit rate where excess crit rate is converted to crit damage, and deals an additional reality damage to the main target. So he's kind of like Blade in Honkai Star Rail in that he does this like cleave attack but does more damage to the center target or to the target he targeted. And then enjoys like crit rate on top of that that can be converted to crit damage. It's kind of like Restless Heart, but for his ultimate. And then his Apprentice's Dance, it's at incantation 2 or higher, it generates Nature's Blessing, where when he casts his ultimate, for every Nature's Blessing stack that he gains Moxie. So if he has like 2 Nature's Blessing, when he casts his ultimate, he will gain 2 Moxie, and then etc. etc. Spirit Medium is a mass debuff that increases damage taken by all enemy targets and shreds reality and mental defense for 2 rounds. So it's basically like Beacorn Bloom's damage taken and reality defense shred plus Baby Blue's mental defense shred all in one, and just a level 1 incantation already generates value. And then if the enemy has status down status, the attack enjoys damage dealt increase by up to 3 stacks. By up to 3 stacks, and then when the caster enters battle, automatically gains 2 stacks of Nature's Blessing. So just with Insight 1, when you cast his first ultimate, you will automatically start with at least 2 Moxie, assuming that you didn't cast a single one of the level 2 or higher Apprentice's Dance. And then Insight 3 at the start of every 2 rounds gains 1 stack of Nature's Blessing. So, one thing I don't understand is that I had so many viewers and so many content creators say that he wants to take a lot of actions. But I think what they don't understand is that you can take a lot of actions if you want to, but he is kind of AP generous in the sense that you don't need to cast as many actions to cast his ultimate. And I think when people say that he wants to take a lot of actions, I think what they mean by that is that you're gaining so much Moxie that you might as well cast 1 or 2 more incantations to get his ultimate up again. I think that's what they mean by that. But you can easily play him as a support unit that shreds, reality and mental defense. Just act like the Beacorn Bloom role, while at the same time dishing a lot of damage, and you don't get the 3-turn silencing effect that Beacorn Bloom has, but you make up for it by being AP generous and probably has a higher damage ceiling than Beacorn Bloom, given that if they are even adding the mechanic of converting crit rate to crit damage, I can totally see a scenario where Shamane's innate crit rate might already be very high. So in a way, he's kind of like he's like so many characters in one. Oh, and by the way, the reason why he kind of reminds me of A Knight is his ability to generate additional Moxie. But I think Shamane generates Moxie way more easily than A Knight does, because A Knight needs to KO enemies or have level 2 incantations or higher. Actually, technically, Shamane also needs a level 2 or higher, but he has more ways to generate Moxie. Instead of KOing the enemy, you just need to have an Insight 1 and an Insight 3. So I think for that reason, Shamane is certainly worthy of being better than Beacorn Bloom, being better than Regulus, but not as good as Pickles, because I think Pickles, he still achieves, he's more AP generous than Shamane, applies a party-wide buff to your entire party, and also dispels. So I think for that reason, Pickles edges out Shamane a little bit, but I feel like both of them are almost Like they're very head to head in terms of edging each other out, or neck to neck, with edging each other out for being high on the tier 0.5 slot. All right, guys, so that wraps it up for my tier list video. This was actually a ton of fun to film. I can't believe I'm not doing more of this. And I know that I'm going to take a lot of heat from people. I think some of you will agree with some of these rankings, but a lot of you might feel like, oh, the character actually deserves to be a tier higher or a tier lower. I would actually love to hear your comments regarding specific characters, because I want to be as close to the truth as possible. So if you can back up your ranking modifications with solid logic, and you guys, especially for those of you guys who maybe have more experience playing like Satsuki than I have, or maybe Diggers than I have, or A Knight, maybe you can shed some light as to maybe things that I didn't talk about or didn't consider, or maybe I put too much uh, weight on one pro and didn't consider the other pro as much, et cetera, et cetera. These kinds of discussions get me really excited, because I think that if a lot of people have differing opinions on the rankings, then that might mean that the game has done a good job with balancing the characters and not making the rankings, the value of the characters, as obvious as maybe some other games. So if you enjoy content like this, please drop a like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye, guys.